Mabuhay, Kamustika, welcome. How are you? This is Bob from Love Beyond the Sea. I'd like to do another video about the age gap controversy that comes up whenever an older foreign man is pursuing a younger Filipina. It is controversial because although many men would prefer a younger wife, they don't generally try to find one. And when such a couple is seen in public, there are the usual characterizations and assumptions about them. Please subscribe to Love Beyond the Sea, where I will address as much as I can about having a relationship with a Filipina. I married a Filipina, 27 years younger, back in 2015. We think we're doing okay. We both realize how our strengths and weaknesses impact our relationship. Go ahead and speak up and leave comments on this situation, ask questions, or share your experiences. One of my subscribers suggested the topic of the generation gap and having a younger wife. I hope I do justice to the topic, and if I don't, please let me know. Age gap is a topic that could chew up a lot of time, a lot more time than we can allocate for this video, because it is so fascinating. Now, some age gap relationships work while some aren't as successful, and it is interesting to pry into why that might be. Let's start with looking at two similar descriptions of what a generation gap is. Number one, a lack of communication between one generation and another, especially between young people and their parents, brought about by differences of tastes, values, outlook, etc. And another one, the years separating one generation from the generation that precedes or follows it, especially when regarded as representing the difference in outlook and lack of understanding between them. Please keep in mind as I begin this, and be prepared to comment on what generation gap challenges there could be between a foreigner and a younger Filipina. This will be something I'll try to get through in one video here, so it'll probably be a little bit longer, but I hope you will find it interesting. Think about what you think are generation gap challenges. I admit it's been difficult for me to separate a simple age gap challenge from what the generational aspect of that would be. Years ago, maybe this isn't such an issue, but today it is possible there are more generation gap issues to deal with. Those of you who have been parents would be helpful in clarifying some issues, so be ready to share your thoughts. It isn't a surprise that an older generation with these differences might not always be naturally compatible with the younger one. At work, for example, I work with younger people sometimes, definitely from a different generation. And when I was younger, I worked with, people that were from an older generation. It is imperative to work together, to get along at least, even if you feel like your coworker is from Mars or the moon. For 8 or more hours a day, you have to learn to be able to work for a common goal. Then you can go home. Obviously, with employment, once the bell rings or the work is done, you go your separate ways to be with someone or to search for someone to be able to call your partner in life. I have known people from an older generation in my adult years, and I generally got along with them. Again, in controlled settings, it is possible to unite with someone of a different generation, get along, to agree on many things despite some differences. Should people always look for someone within a few years age of each other to marry, at risk of being foolish? Well, I think it depends. If someone has already engaged in an age gap relationship, get rid of that. Let's say they are married. Does that mean that it's just a matter of time before their marriage becomes unraveled because the weight of the differences between them is too much to bear? Again, it depends. I will try to make it clear from my perspective what success depends on. There are differences to deal with in an age gap relationship of the same nationality, and possibly others with someone from a different country and culture. How important is this? There are always going to be differences between a man and a woman of the same age, from the same city, same culture, same education level, same friends, and even with some similar core beliefs. People are different. We all understand that. Yet somehow they must band together in various circumstances for a common good. You get to decide if the differences between you and a younger Filipina or any younger woman are going to be insurmountable. You can spend as much time as you like trying to discern those differences, or in our case, getting married in less than 8 weeks. You will discover differences maybe you could have known about with more time dating each other, but we decided to work out any differences after we got married. This would mean that we made a conscious or unconscious decision to manage the differences as they became apparent and believed that we could. But what if these generational differences are deal breakers? Who says they have to be deal breakers? It doesn't have to. That all depends on two key factors, as far as I can tell, and they are very related to each other, so they might as well be synonymous. One is maturity, and the other is love, that puts feelings aside and focuses on action. Notice I didn't mention how we feel, because how we are treated if our ego gets stroked. Large age gap marriages do work for many people, likely more than we know, because they aren't on YouTube celebrating their relationship, or in my case, wanting to help guys know what they are getting into should they pursue a younger Filipina, should they look for a younger Filipina. It depends on the man's wisdom and maturity. I'm going to list common age gap differences that can irritate and frustrate people with generation gap between them, and how being wise and mature allows them to work around these differences. And these will be in no particular order. Let's call a generation gap roughly 20 to 22 years. Let's start with culture. There are issues in the culture to deal with. Today, especially in the Philippines, sex change is common, confusion of sexual orientation to a degree that I find disturbing. I don't know what role the parents have in all this, but it is very possible the younger Filipina you want to marry someday doesn't think this is a big deal. She will probably know ladyboys. You might think this is reprehensible. I would want to know her views on this before marriage. Whether you would live in the Philippines or America, you should be prepared to talk about this if you want to have children. I don't sense any outrage about this in the Philippines, but if you have strong feelings against this, I think you should let her know, children or not. Can you imagine the friction if one parent thinks the child's sex is obvious and the other parent thinks the child can choose what they want it to be? The younger Filipina you are interested in perhaps has a degree and has been working to support her family. You might have plans to settle down with her and spend ample time each day together, and might not even need her to work. However, it is her cultural responsibility to work to provide for her family, and you aren't going to win this one. If she doesn't get a job, you'll need to provide support. You are aware there is a lot of poverty in the Philippines and are glad that you're able to lift her from this situation. Just be aware that it is best not to bring this up. Filipinos have pride. They do the best they can. She probably wasn't discontent if she was poor, and she probably doesn't dream of becoming rich. She won't like the Philippines being referred to as a third world country. If you want her to act dignified, then she needs to be treated in a dignified way. It is quite possible as a young Filipina, she grew up watching her mother take the financial responsibility and run the affairs of the house. I have read that sometimes it is the mother who inflicts the greatest physical punishment or discipline on the child. When she is married to an older foreigner or even just dating him, all she knows is what she has observed about the family dynamic growing up in the Philippines. Let's talk about energy level, and let's just get this one out of the way. A younger woman is going to have, or already or eventually, more energy. What should she do with it? I think she should be encouraged to do what she finds fulfilling. If she isn't already doing that, I would talk to her about what that might be. If I try to get her to spend an inappropriate amount of energy or time on me, that could lead to resentment. There will come a time in any age gap relationship, especially in marriage, where I will need my wife to naturally spend more time helping me manage in my later years. Here's a good thing about marrying a Filipina. She comes from a culture where elderly are respected and older husbands are taken care of. If I am wise, mature, I will allow her to accomplish what she deems important in her life, and rest assured a big part of that is helping her family financially. I see that as making deposits in an account I will need to withdraw from later in life. I want to treat her in a way that makes it possible for her to be with me in my old age. I can help her by helping her avoid burning out or spending too much time with things that are not important. By the way, I don't think Filipinas have a reputation for spending their time doing frivolous things. If she does, then she is too young or immature to be married. Again, your energy and vitality is going to be declining. Treat her well, and it will help you later in life. Now, these other things are not so much physical. Tattoos, piercings, etc. What do you call that? Body art, maybe? Recently, I went to buy some pizza, and the young girl who worked there had some kind of thing in her upper or lower lip, kind of like a nose ring for a lip. She was cute and didn't need to do anything extra for her appearance, but it made me wonder what I would think if I was interested in a Filipina who had her eyebrows pierced, a nose ring, something in her lip. Some women even pierce their tongues. Someone my age in America might do things like this, but it is normally from someone of a younger generation. Now, maybe this kind of thing hasn't caught on yet in the Philippines. I would be concerned that they might keep adding other embellishments that I don't like. Sometimes people get carried away and can't stop. And I could add tattoos to this list. Some men might not care at all, but for me, I wouldn't like it. But maybe might be okay if it was a really small one. But then again, how can you guarantee she won't get carried away and not be able to stop? Let's talk about sex. If you're married to a younger Filipina, your sex life might not be the same as what she might hear some of her friends talking about. As you age, it eventually won't be what you want it to be, or what it was. This area has potential for conflict if the Filipina wants it more than he does. That might not be an issue if they were the same age. This isn't going to be a big issue with some couples. As with anything else, it depends on, the Filipina and her husband, his condition. Just think about it. And this can be tagged with the energy category. A subscriber shared this quote, and it applies here. He said, if you decided to take up jogging, would you go join a couple of 19-year-olds to go running with? My answer would be not unless you're in the shape and condition of a 19-year-old. This doesn't preclude a good intimate relationship with a younger woman. It just means the better shape you are in, the better that will tend to be from a physical standpoint. While sex is a physical act, it is also an act of love, so an older man should have an advantage over a younger man, and that he should be able to focus on the needs of the Filipina and know how to treat her throughout the day to facilitate a good experience in the bedroom. I would love to talk more about this, but we wouldn't have time to get to these other categories. Now, she might not care at all if he uses Viagra, or she might think he's not attracted to her, or she might just think that's a strange thing to do. As money is a hot topic with Filipinas, I think sex is too. I think this is a topic that needs to be discussed if there might be an issue with performance. Let's talk about interests. She might have different interests. That's good as long as they don't conflict with the possibility of having a long-term committed relationship, which I consider marriage. Yes, I believe you can trust a Filipina who is much younger than you are. If her interests are not necessarily up your alley, no big deal. They are her interests and you have yours. They don't have to be shared as much as respected. Talk about what interests her while dating and why they're interesting to her, and try to understand her. Social media will almost assuredly be something a younger Filipina will be consumed with. At least that is likely how it will appear to the man who doesn't have that same passion. It seems younger people everywhere have cell phones and computers and would find it very difficult to decrease its use. Yes, this takes time out of your relationship, but I think it needs to be allowed as long as it doesn't become a problem. She is used to talking to her friends and family, and that won't stop. Hopefully the hours she calls them isn't a problem between you, since there's a sizable time zone difference. Now, social media has also affected the younger generation today in the way they interact person to person, face to face. I think they're not learning like we used to by having civil discussions about things they disagree on, because they don't often do it face to face. It is much easier to disagree or avoid someone or something by merely clicking a button. People say things online they wouldn't say in person. This definitely could be something affecting the younger Filipina that you want to be with. We only have so much time for so many interests. So if her interests aren't opposed to yours, just be sure there's no conflict of interest of some kind. As for Filipinas, she is interested in a better life as far as security for herself, helping her family experience a measure of that, and being loved by someone who can accept this. She can make a great wife, as many of us already know. Now, she will have the outlook on life of a woman from a different generation. I don't have children, so it's hard for me to quickly recognize an issue that could be from differences due to a generation gap. So please comment on this and we can talk about it in the comments. A generation gap is more problematic if there are significant changes during that time in values and priorities. Part of me wants to believe that generation gap differences might be different with Filipinas and Western women, but I am not sure. What do you think? So as we continue, I talked about humor. Well, maybe I didn't. As far as humor goes, that has come up before, where I have seen Filipinas say they don't understand their husbands say they don't understand, my sense of humor. I have kind of a dry wit and sarcasm, and there are times my wife just, makes a face and, she doesn't understand what I'm saying because, there is a cultural gap, maybe a generational gap too, when it comes to humor. But remember, there's also the energy, sex, basic interests that are part of a generation gap. But let's talk about a few more. Let's talk about possibly education level. Sometimes this is part of a generation gap, but not always. It is a good thing my wife has a college degree. In America, I think women go to college more than men do. Actually, I believe it's about the same in the Philippines, but probably for different reasons. I wouldn't love her less if she didn't, but it shows she can have a goal and accomplish it with much effort and diligence. I don't have a college degree. My wife doesn't need me to. She didn't marry me because of my education, and I didn't marry her because of hers. I compliment her on how bright she is. If I handle this with maturity, that won't be a problem. From a Filipina's perspective, I don't think education is at the top of her list. Maybe in America, but she is looking for someone with character and to be a provider. If this describes you, then a Filipina may be in your future. Just be aware that if you don't have a college degree and she does, you want to be sure to avoid jealousy on your part. Something tells me the Filipina won't use her degree to make the foreigner feel small, but you should ask her if she works in your country what she intends to do. She may want it to tie into that degree. Let's talk here about the technological level. I do think this is part of a generation difference. I am not very capable with technological things, and it can frustrate me to no end, especially wanting to have a YouTube channel. Does this bother my Filipino wife? No, it didn't bother her when we were dating. She fills this gap in my life since technology is so important today. It could be that she gets frustrated. I don't know if she does, but she handles all of our tech issues, and I compliment her always on how much I appreciate and need this from her. She doesn't look down on me, and hopefully, she doesn't resent me for that. I don't envy her because of what she can do. I mean, I wish I could do that, but I can't. But she fills that void, I guess, in our relationship. We need that, and hopefully your Filipina doesn't think you're some kind of a dummy if you're like me and you're not very good with technology. Included in technological level would be that she is likely to be proficient in smartphones, tablets, computers, other gadgets, and be accustomed to spending a lot of time on them. How about taste in music? If I like Bing Crosby and my Filipina likes Bruno Mars or Eminem, what would the solution be? It would be for us to evaluate if that poses a problem before marrying. It shouldn't be an issue in dating. It's a difference in music. If the difference in musical taste is bothersome, I think it would be good to remind ourselves why we are attracted to each other in the first place and how she can be a good wife. There are people my age that like music that would get you arrested in the Philippines. If you like to blast AC/DC and she likes Morissette and Mon playing in the house, that could be interesting. Musical taste has not been a problem for my wife and I because we discovered early on that we actually like the same kind of music. Some of the same artists like Billy Joel and the Carpenters and others. When she first wrote that she liked the Bee Gees, I honestly wondered how that could be true, since the Bee Gees were huge in my high school years, maybe even junior high. But she knew the lyrics to some songs to my surprise, and when I met her in the Philippines, I heard a lot of music playing from the 70s. I would not have expected to hear a Lobo song blasting from a speaker out there. My wife and I enjoy karaoke a lot because our music tastes are similar. In fact, when she does karaoke with other Filipinas, all of their selections are pretty much love songs, and they're familiar with the songs I grew up with. We could also talk about dancing, similar to music. If he really likes to dance, unless she obliges him now and then, that won't be something they can share. So that is something to know ahead of time if this isn't very important to the man. How about taste in television entertainment? I'd like to think an older guy would not be spending much time watching television shows, apart from the news. On the flip side, I wouldn't expect a Filipina to spend much time at all watching the news, and definitely would want to watch television shows and even go to the movies. I've seen the shows in the Philippines, and I know what my wife likes to watch, and I like a lot of them too. Now, clothing tastes, this could get interesting. I didn't exactly dress in rags, but my Filipino wife had her idea of what she wanted me to look like. At first, this isn't so endearing, but eventually, you can get used to it, learn not to fight it, because it would do no good. And it pleased my wife to dress me in a way that she was proud of. She wants me to look the best I can. Now, she likes doing that. I don't look at it like she is trying to control me, and neither should you. She has a good eye for, fashion. If I were to insist on not changing my appearance in this way, she would take that as not being interested in what she thinks is doing me a favor. A Filipino will naturally dress in a nice, appropriate way, at least the kind you should marry, and will protest and resist wearing something she thinks is indecent. Once again, being open to change helps to not let this become an issue. I'll just add here that facial hair isn't usually preferred by a Filipina, so be prepared to talk about that. She has her idea of what looks appealing and will try to accommodate the man's age, but he will need to allow her to. We can talk about attitude. If the younger generation has a poor attitude, this should be measured before getting married. This would be a huge deal breaker for me. If you characterize younger people today a certain way that is not complimentary, don't forget that the younger Filipina might have some of these same characteristics. However, I sense that there are many Filipinos who have good attitudes and are respectful of elders. Changing your attitude would require a lot of effort and patience. I could talk about food choices. This would bother me if there was a huge difference in how we ate. For instance, if one of you eats healthy, the other one didn't. If you meet her in person and spend some time with her, you'll get an idea of this, but that is not a guarantee how she will eat in a new country. A junk food junkie is not going to easily change their eating habits, so this is not a small thing to account for. Pop or Pepsi, Coke seems to be abundant in the Philippines, and I've tried my best to educate my wife about soda pop and sugar for that matter. I could eat better myself. I think it is appropriate to have a conversation about food choices in a non-threatening way. There are probably other differences that come from a generation gap that affects an age gap relationship, but after seeing this video, I'd like to think you will be more comfortable chatting with a Filipino prospect with differences such as these and try to bring them up in the context of getting to know each other. You might also consider that differences can be good for a relationship. It can give your life a freshness you wouldn't have if you could theoretically marry someone with everything in common. Don't know that that would be a good idea. Marrying anyone requires flexibility. Trying to gain an understanding of differences you have with a woman might enable you to see it as having potential to be a positive for your relationship. As always, keep in mind the things you have in common and work to find things you can share in common from here on out. You can't control how you both grew up, but you can decide to find interests that would apply to both of you. So please leave a comment in the comment section about any other generation gap issues that you can think of. And being respectful of each other's differences is going to make it a lot easier for you to find love beyond the sea.